Are we all set? Okay, welcome to the next in the series, Authors' Rights and Wrongs panel discussion. This time the focus is on chemistry publishing. We have three great panelists lined up. I just wanted to I'm David Yaron from the Department of Chemistry. I'm neither an editor, I'm just a publisher and reader of ACS Journals. I think there's three common themes that you'll see come up in the discussions. One is the rising cost of subscriptions in general. So one of the reasons this issue is becoming more and more important to more and more people is the cost of subscribing to research journals is rising significantly faster than inflation, and so universities have to come to grips with this. The other issue is around copyright. Who owns the product of a researcher when they put that into a paper and submit it to a journal? What rights are they giving up and what rights are they retaining? And recently the NIH decided to implement a policy that everyone funded by NIH has to make their research papers available in the PubMed archive 1 year after publication date. So you'll see that come up, and the policies that will be being discussed are heavily influenced by NIH's decision to do that. And the third issue is more and more universities, including Carnegie Mellon, have already implemented or are planning on implementing an institutional archive. The purpose of this is to have the research product and artistic products of the university saved somewhere so that you can gain access, people can gain access to all of the great information the university is producing. And one impact this has is it increases the visibility of people's research. Research has shown that if you have your article available so that people can read it without having to gain access through subscriptions or some other means, that you're much more likely to be cited. So those are the main issues you'll see come up in the discussion. I'm the moderator. The first panelist is Hyung Kim. He is a theoretical chemist, and he is head of the Department of Chemistry, so is strongly impacting on decisions, involved in decisions relating to what journals we can afford to get and which we cannot. So, Professor Kim.
Thank you, David. My name is Hyung Kim, as David introduced. I'm professor and head of chemistry at Carnegie Mellon. My research area is theoretical and computational chemistry, more broadly physical chemistry. I publish my research articles in ACS Journals as well as AIP, American Institute of Physics Journals. And what I'll do in the next few minutes is just give you a very brief overview of ACS copyright and open access policies, and highlight some differences between ACS, American Chemical Society, and AIP. Okay. So what is ACS? That's American Chemical Society. It's a non-profit organization. Its membership exceeds 160,000. It's the largest scientific society in the world. It publishes about exactly 36 professional journals in chemistry and related areas. Annual downloads of ACS Journals is about 55 million, so it's huge. And also, the about 1,500 universities worldwide subscribe to this service, SciFinder Scholar. That's a software tool to get data access maintained by CAS, Chemical Abstract Services. Let's look at the impact of ACS Journals. This is 2006 report of Thomson Scientific. ACS Journals are #1 in citations in so-called 7 core chemistry categories. So, for example, 47th percentile of total citations in multidisciplinary chemistry are from articles published in journals such as Journal of the American Chemical Society, accounts of chemical research, and chemical reviews. So let's go to my field, physical chemistry. The ACS journals such as Journal of Physical Chemistry A, B, and C series accounts for about 28% of total citations. ACS journals are also number one in citations in other categories such as agriculture, environmental engineering, nanoscience and technology, and so on and so forth. All this information is from ACS website. Okay, so ACS journals are really high-impact journals. Now let's take a look at ACS Publications copyright and permissions. This information is the couple of transparencies I'm going to show next are mainly from this PowerPoint presentation given at this URL of website. So if you want to find more information, you can go to this website, click on this PowerPoint presentation, and you can find more details. Okay, here I'll give you some highlights of ACS copyright and permissions. So, as David mentioned, so what do we own when we do research and submit articles of our research to journals? What do we own? Actually, when you sign ACS copyright form, you don't own anything. ACS owns everything, including text, tables, and figures of your articles. Okay, so the question is, can you then use those figures of your ACS articles in other papers? The answer is yes, as long as you modify your figures a little bit. So as long as you use your own figures or own tables, you can use those figures and tables in other articles. And of course, ACS claims only the copyright, in other words, proprietary right, such as patents reside with you or your employer. Okay, what about posting your papers on your website? So the question is, can you post your journal articles on your personal or university website? And the answer is no. In other words, ACS does not allow you to post your articles published in ACS journals on your website. Okay. But ACS does give some permission to post the following, namely title, abstract tables, and figures of your papers. Again, as long as these are your own paper, not ACS formatted figures or tables. Okay, so you need to create your own figures, which are slightly different from ACS, those published in ACS articles. Okay, so that's what ACS allows you to do. And this policy is much more restrictive than that of, for example, American Institute of Physics. For example, AIP allows you to post the full articles in any format on your website or your university's website. So, for example, once your article is published in AIP journals, you can get PDF files and you can post it on your website. Also, AIP allows posting of your own paper, not AIP formatted paper, but your own paper on free access ePrint servers such as archive.org. So AIP is much more flexible in allowing you to post your articles on websites, a variety of different websites. Okay, what about sharing your papers? ACS allows you to make 50 copies of your paper, hard copy of your papers, and distribute to your colleagues. And this internet age, also, they allow 50 free e-prints. It works as follows. Once your paper gets accepted by ACS, then ACS will email you a link, URL, okay, such as this one. This is the URL I received for one of my recent papers. So they email this URL to you, and you can either post this URL on your website or email to your colleagues. And up to 50 downloads are free. Okay? And as David mentioned early on, after 2 months, 2 months after the publication of your article, then the access is free, but only through this URL. Okay. After 12 months, sorry. Yes, right. What did I say? I wish that was my wish, I guess. Right. Okay. Now, if you want immediate general open access to your articles, then there is a fee-based mechanism called author choice. So depending on your status and the status of your institution. So Carnegie Mellon is affiliated subscriber of ACS Journals, and I'm an ACS member. So if I pay $1,000 for my article, then everyone can access my article through ACS website. Okay, and of course, if you are not a member, then fee goes up. Okay, and AIP has a similar option called Author Select. And for example, for Journal of Chemical Physics, the fee is $1,500. Okay, what about institutional subscription prices? For academic institutions, well, this information is for Carnegie Mellon only, I think, but I think generally this is true. So for academic institutions, ACS journal subscription prices are comparable to those of other nonprofit organizations such as AIP. But a couple of things I like to notice is ACS charges for our archive access, even though it's not a huge amount of money. And the pricing increase for CMU over the last 5 years is about 40%, although the number of titles probably we subscribe has increased a little bit. So this is not really a fair number, but nonetheless, I don't think the actual price increase is as low as like 20%. So it's a representative number. And ACS has a huge customer base in industry, so ACS is financially, I think, more flexible than AIP. That's just sort of the general impression. So some final thoughts. I think the ACS is moving in the right direction in terms of open access. And one of the major push along this direction was, as again David mentioned, NIH's mandate that publications of research supported by NIH should be deposited in the database PubMed Central 12 months after the publication. And some of the issues we want to think about is, can there be better open access? I think there is definitely room for better open access, and some uncertainties about future subscription pricing. And ACS is arguably the most dominant player in scientific publishing in chemistry and related areas. So what they do and what they will do will be very, very influential and make huge impact on, I think, the policies and standards and everything related to scientific publishing. So with acknowledgments, I'd like to conclude. Thank you.
We can do questions after each speaker, and then also.
So, Jay, you had a problem with a figure. Was that with ACS or with Elsevier?
I have a few things in my presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
I won't be gentle on either of them.
Okay.
Switch computers. Which microphone is it that's active? Is it? Oh, okay. too much of a rose.
Sorry.
So here's some links, especially for people watching at home. The handout, is the handout one of these links?
We'll have a good idea as soon as I don't know if it's up there now, but it will
Okay.
be. We discussed it.
So people in the room have a handout that lists the policies of various publishers with regards to open access and archiving. And the back of the handout gives a list of looking at the chemistry department website and seeing how many people have full text articles present. One of the things the university library system is doing this semester is looking at the web pages for all the departments in the university and seeing how many people are taking full advantage of the rights they do have. So if you do publish somewhere where you're allowed to put full text on your website, how many people are actually taking advantage of that? And preparing for being able to assist faculty in making their articles as available as would be compliant with the law. So our next speaker is David Zombach. He is the Walter J. Blanco Senior Professor of Environmental Engineering. He has a lot of experience in publishing. He's currently the Associate Editor of Environmental Science and Technology, which is an ACS journal. But he has experience in the past as Associate Editors on journals published by other organizations. So,
thank you, David. Denise, can you fire me up here?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to participate today. This is a complex, evolving issue, so I really thank our librarians for bringing the conversation to our campus so we can think about these issues and what we want to do for our own community here. I'm going to talk about the cost and value of independent publishing of research, which in the open access environment, there are some dangers to the structure we currently have that has served us pretty well, and I'm going to talk about that a bit. I'm going to talk about my work with professional society journals, a quick run through the publishing process and the costs involved with that process, and close out with some thoughts about dangers to independent peer-reviewed publications. I have served as associate editor for 3 journals: Journal of Groundwater, Water Environment Research. The Journal of Groundwater is published by the National Groundwater Association. Water Environment Research is published by the Water Environment Federation. And as David mentioned, I'm currently an associate editor, one of 13, with Environmental Science and Technology, published by the American Chemical Society. Environmental Science and Technology is the world's leading journal in both environmental science and environmental engineering in total citations and in a total number of papers published. We published last year 1,205 articles. We received about 3,300 articles. We have a rejection rate somewhere in the range of 35, an acceptance rate somewhere in the 35 to 40% range. So there are a lot of manuscripts to handle. When I was with the Journal of Groundwater, I handled about 20 or 25 manuscripts a year, and with Water Environment Research, about 50 per year. And that was a fair amount of work. That was Saturday mornings every week. This is, with ES&T, an even greater amount of work. I work on that every evening, 5 or 6 days a week. And I am, so my bias is out. I am paid for this last one. It's a modest amount, but it's the only way I can justify it to my family, especially my spouse. I was unpaid. The previous 2 service on the editorial board was unpaid service. And frankly, I wouldn't do the volume of work I do with the S&T if it wasn't paid. It's just too much. And I'll tell you a little. I think I have some data a little bit later. Each associate editor handles 250 to 270 manuscripts a year, and so it's a fair amount of work. So the publishing process and peer review, for those of you not so familiar with it, in the online age, an author submits via an online website The publisher logs that submission. The journal editor then chooses and solicits referees. The referees review and usually do that. That's on a pro bono basis. So most scientists and engineers working in research have reviewed many, many papers as a service to the profession, as have I. Then the reviews come back, and the editor makes a decision about whether to accept the paper, allow the if revisions are needed, allow the authors to revise, and then if it's going for revision, sends the article on to the authors for revision. It comes back. It may go out again to the referees for a second round of review, and at ES&T, generally one round of revision is allowed, and then the editor makes a decision. Agrees to publish or declines the article. At that point, the publisher requests transfer of copyright, and the article is copy edited by the publisher. In the case of ES&T, that's by American Chemical Society Publications staff. The article is formatted for online and print publication by the publisher. The author is sent the formatted article for final proofing, and the article is then posted online and printed by the publisher. The article is indexed, search and finding tools are created by the publisher, and then journal subscribers receive online access and or print copy. So you're all pretty familiar with that process, but just to remind you here, there are multiple stages here, many steps. People are involved at every step of the way. Some of the service is free, but much of it is not, and reminds us that there are a significant amount of resources involved with this process. For high-quality research publications like environmental science and technology, we work very hard to maintain quality, and any publication that aims to do that works to have a very strong peer review process, and that requires soliciting of strong, qualified reviewers, and so that whole review process, paying a lot of attention to that is very important. Maintaining ethical standards in publications. From my editorial work, it never ceases to surprise me the kinds of ethical violations that we encounter, from fraudulent data to fraudulent SEM images to use of other people's images and data, all sorts of things. And attention to that and maintaining high ethical quality in a publication takes effort. Maintaining international production and indexing standards takes effort and resources. And looking more broadly beyond one publication, high-quality scientific research, a publication is benefited by having multiple outlets for authors to publish their work in. So the current system we have, in which authors have many choices of where to publish, is a very healthy aspect of the system. So a little bit about the infrastructure of peer review from my personal involvement with environmental science and technology. I mentioned at ES&T I'm one of 13 associated editors. Each of us handles a large number of manuscripts. Each of us has an editorial assistant. It's for me, a three-quarters position of someone here at Carnegie Mellon. I couldn't do this job without my assistant. There's a great deal of correspondence, both with authors, with reviewers, with the American Chemical Society Publications staff. And as I say, I couldn't do the job without the editorial assistant. It takes a lot of effort to get high-quality reviews. It also surprises me how many reviewers say, no, too busy. Their colleagues are not too busy. We ask for recommendations for reviewers. We have to, I study those carefully. The key to high-quality peer review process is making sure you have qualified, good, diligent reviewers. And on average, it takes soliciting about 12 reviewers to get 3 reviews. and I aim to have 3 reviews for every paper that we put into review. There are ethical certifications that we obtain from the authors, and we also distribute ethical information to reviewers, ask them to review that before beginning their work. Permissions for figures and images that are published elsewhere, for which someone else owns the copyright. We don't want to infringe on others' copyrights, so we pay a lot of attention to that, protecting the creators of that other work, protecting their rights. So the infrastructure of peer review, there's a lot of time and resources in that involving many people. So a few words about value added by publishers. And some of them are listed here. Registration and promotion of the author's contribution. So that is a documentation of precedents in publication, and that can evolve into sticky issues that a publisher takes responsibility for helping protect authors' rights in that regard. Certification protection of author rights. If someone else is stealing your work, reprinting figures that are in our publication. The American Chemical Society is the publisher of ES&T. If that is brought to our attention, we'll pursue remedies in that regard. Supporting international standards and protocols for publication, the standardization across journals and indexing and referencing enables the system to function as well as it does. The development of tools and methods for submission, production, dissemination, and archiving. The very nice web access that ES&T and other journals have developed, that all requires resources to develop, test, debug. And the technology is continuously changing. Staying up with that requires resources again. Preserving the content into the future, migrating it onto new technology platforms as they evolve. These are all costly endeavors. And publishers add value to our publications as authors in providing these services. So all publishing indeed has costs in all media, online media. There are some costs that can be reduced. Some costs are higher than doing print. The total cost of publishing a journal article with print and electronic edition is in the range of $1,500 to $4,000 per article. And that's across all scholarly journals. That's not just ACS or ES&T. Costs are higher for journals with higher rejection rates. We reject 60% of the articles that come to us, so there's all those resources into processing those manuscripts, and they don't appear in published pages. Electronic-only publication is still in this range, as Professor Kim put up some of the author choice options that ACS offers that puts costs in this kind of range. So I mentioned reviewers provide peer review pro bono, but the rest of the process requires significant financial resources. And the costs have to be paid some way. So there are different business models. The author pays, that's the author choice model. Private publisher pays, that's the sort of the traditional format where the publisher pays, copyrights transferred to the publisher. Or the government pays. So if we're going to shift more and more publication to the government, like NIH, PubMed, then NIH is paying to maintain those online resources, the archiving resources, and ultimately the taxpayer is picking up the cost of doing that. And some thoughts about how ignoring copyright endangers independent publication. Ultimately, if the private sector publisher copyrighted publications are distributed without any money coming back to the publisher can't stay in business. If they're freely distributed, subscribers, of course, are going to walk away from paying subscriptions if you can get them elsewhere, and the independent publishers will go out of business. And publication will then be the province of the individual, my own personal website, or the institution, Carnegie Mellon's website, if that's where we're going to decide to put our work, or the government, if we put it at PubMed, for example. And in this, there's a great potential for independent, peer-reviewed publication to be weakened. If I publish something on my website or my institution, my university, or my company, there's all the potential associated bias that goes along with that. If I publish it with the government, there are various dangers associated with that. First, it's taxpayer supported. Turning publishing of research over to the government scares me in a number of ways. As we know, taxpayer-supported activities are subject to greater and lesser interest as the interest of the taxpayer changes. And there will certainly be periodic pressure for cost reduction through elimination of journals, or reduction in the amount of publication, or reduction of any of the aspects of publishing research. There will also be periodic pressures for censorship of various kinds. And we've seen this with Congress people railing against something they don't like that the National Endowment for the Arts is doing, or any other federal agency. And I can, to close out here, a case study close to the field I work in, environmental engineering. In 2006, under great cost reduction pressure, the Environmental Protection Agency was instructed to close many of its libraries at its regional offices. These are the libraries that serve as resources for the scientists and engineers working in the agency, and for others to come in and use those resources. A number of them were closed, hours were reduced, acquisitions were reduced. This is the environment that government publication would for all of us would put us in. I think we want to think about that pretty carefully. And I think that's all I have. I will take any questions you have, or we can defer that to the general discussion.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Jay Apt from the Tupper School of Business, where he is Executive Director of the Electricity Industry Center.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Sorry.
Assistance with this, so you know what you're
I'm
doing?
always happy to have help. Sorry to have walked in a bit late. The Tupper School does not have the class break that the rest of the university does, and my class meets at 3:30. And I gave this a short lecture. I'm going to talk about a few things that we may not have seen covered. I'm going to start with a couple of premises, but first let me tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. I'm the old guy in the room. I published my first paper, it turned out to be in Physical Review Letters, in 1974, my first paper in Science 2 or 3 years later, and I publish as much as I can in ES&T, 4 papers in the last couple of years, I guess. And second, everything that Dave said about ES&T, it's a marvelous journal. It is the top in its field. I will start with a premise that your papers are because you want to change the world, not because you want to have something on your CV. And that you actually want your research to make a difference. What that means to me is two things. Bouncing it off my colleagues at meetings and having them be able to beat the living daylights out of me in a preprint. And if it survives that, then they're going to change the way that they look at the world. And that's what I want. And what I want to talk to you about today is not directly the kinds of things that you've just heard about, but some of the consequences of the details of these policies. And some of the differences between what the journal authors, the journal publishers say and what they do. Let me start with my favorite journal, ES&T. This, I want to make sure, was current, so you see it's accessed last Friday out of the instructions for authors. And so I want to read this. Proceedings of conferences and symposia. You cannot publish your presentation and proceedings, paper or electronic, that are copyrighted except by ACS, and then submit it to ES&T. That's prior publication. There is no, repeat, no, scientific meeting that I have gone to in the last 5 years that does not have a copyrighted proceedings. Okay? There may be others, I don't know, in your field, Dave, all those are copyrighted. Most of them are copyrighted. And for the same reason, they need to make a buck. You know, and I don't have a problem with that, but the fact is that they're mostly copyrighted. If the proceedings are not copyrighted, fat chance, a short abstract without figures or tables is permissible. However, if the manuscript, a manuscript with essentially the same data in figures and tables, or an extended abstract is published in the proceedings, it cannot be considered for publication by ES&T. It's the responsibility of the authors to notify us of any abstracts that have been published in any form. My group reads that as saying, I cannot go to a conference in general, except an ACS conference, perhaps, because ACS ones are exempt, before I've published it. And we can skate around that a little bit, but in the selective conferences, and they're just as selective as the journals, if I try and skate too much and don't give them the figure, I'm not going to get my paper accepted. I might get a poster paper or something. And that's a real practical limitation, as far as I'm concerned, in understanding whether or not we can really get our work to make a difference in our field. Okay? And so this is a real problem that I have, and I don't mean to beat up on ES&T. I'm going to beat up on Elsevier here in just a second. But this particular restriction is, for me, a real limitation in how I do science, because it means that I really can't take the stuff that I want to submit to ES&T. I've got a brilliant graduate student now, and we're just writing up a paper that is going to shake one particular subfield of renewable energy, we think, to its foundations. I'm going to a conference in Madrid in a month where this would be just perfect, and I couldn't put that in the conference, right? Because I want it in the ES&T. And I mean, everybody who is anybody in that field is going to be in Madrid, and I can't show those data. Just can't do it. Okay. I think we've touched on this, but I just want to hit it again. Since I am a recovering physicist, and my first publications were all in physics journals, I was used to the way that things are done in physics. This was before the preprint servers, but you sent preprints every place. That was the way that you got feedback on your stuff. You sent preprints out before you sent it to the American Institute of Physics Journals. Right? And if you wanted to make sure that it was right. And not incidentally, send it to all the people who you thought was going to review it. Right? So, but this is also a quote from the ES&T website. ES&T will consider for publication a paper that has been posted on an electronic site available to the general public, provided that the site is the personal site of the author and is not connected to a commercial site. But I got to take it down as soon as I submit it. How long is the review process at ES&T, Dave?
6 weeks.
9 months before publication. The review process is only 6 weeks. Sorry, I asked the wrong question. It's for my 4 papers. For my 4 papers, I just looked it up here. The median was 9 months between when I submitted and when publish your own journal.
If they're in the policy
Yeah.
domain, they take a little longer.
Yeah, you bet. And you're right, the review is much quicker than that. But I got to take it down for those 9 months. Okay. Authors must notify us at the time of submission if the material has been available on the internet or equivalent electronic media. I don't know what that means. I'm scared, right? If I notify Jared that my personal website has had this paper up, does that mean that there's some prejudice against it? I can't tell from this. I can probably tell, but my PhD students are scared. They're quaking in their boots. Right? So we don't do that. When the paper is published, authors may provide an electronic link from that site to the S&T homepage. That's fine. If the website is a commercial site not owned by ACS, the authors are advised that the consideration of the paper may be endangered. I actually don't know what that applies to. I'm sure there are some, but I don't know enough to talk about that last sentence. So I look at this and I say no preprint servers in my field. I think that's bad. The way that we can really make a difference in both fellow scientists looking at this and in my field, which touches greatly on policy, since every change that I want to make costs a minimum of $10 billion, right? I got to involve some people who can write those kind of checks, is really getting it out there. And so that's a problem for me, because I want to make sure when I say something that a lot of people have had a chance to take a look at it. And yeah, I can send it to individuals, and I do that. And I probably send 10, 12, 15 copies of everything before I send it to a journal. But a preprint server is a whole different matter. And the AIP preprint servers are really good from that standpoint. Okay, so now let me stop beating up on ACS. I'm going to beat up on Elsevier. Okay, so you'll read in the paper that was given out that Elsevier is a gentle giant, and you can do anything that you want, and they'll love you. Okay, let me show you what was on the two of the most recent author copies that I got from Elsevier. And so you get this reprint and with the lead article in Electricity Journal and some policy. And let me show you these two. And I'll just read you what's on these reprints. This article was published in an Elsevier journal, no kidding. And is furnished to the author for non-commercial research and education use. Okay, author's benefit, and for the benefit of the author's institution, some. And including instruction at the author's institution, sharing with colleagues, and providing to the institution administration. That sounds very interesting. Other uses including reproduction and distribution or selling and licensing copies or posting to personal, institutional, or third-party websites are prohibited. Okay, so I can't post this. Fine. In most cases, authors are permitted to post their version, LaTeX or Word, to their personal website or institutional repository. Well, I don't know what most cases means, but this sounds pretty good to me. Okay? Authors requiring further information regarding Elsevier's archive and manuscript policies are encouraged to visit this. There's nothing of use on that. I've been there. And when I inquired a couple of years ago what they mean by in most cases, nobody ever got back to me. Sorry. So now let me look at energy policy, which is a place that we put a lot of stuff, maybe twice as many things as I put in ES&T or science in there, because it's read worldwide by a lot of the policymakers and the scientists working in this field. This article was originally published in a journal published by Elsevier, and the attached copy is provided, blah, 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 for the author's benefit and for the benefit of the author's institution. Right, Gloria, love that. Okay. For non-commercial research and educational use, including without limitation use in instruction at your institution. Great, okay, so I can give this to my students. Sending it to specific colleagues and providing a copy to your institution's administrator. All other uses. Reproduction and distribution, including without limitation commercial reprints, selling or licensing or access, or posting on open internet sites, your personal or institution's website or repository, are prohibited. So I can give it to the administrator, but they can't put it on their repository. I don't know what a repository is. It could be an archive that this is prohibited, but I think it doesn't mean that. I think it means just electronic. But look at the difference between these two Elsevier journals. I mean, these are 3 or 4 months apart that I got these, and so I think that they're the same, the same elsewhere, and they're probably still the same. In this one, I can post my Word or LaTeX version. In this one, there's no mention of that. And I probably can't without treading on thin ice. Okay. This is a minefield for authors, in my humble but correct opinion. Right? And the problem that I have is not at all got to do with open access or with copyrights. I know that it costs $3,000 or $4,000. Actually, I'm a little surprised that it's as low as $1,500 to $4,000. When I was working with Physical Review, it was about $500, and that was in the mid-'70s. And so it's been a factor of at least 4 inflation since then. So it may be right. But anyway, it is really expensive to do. The thing that I have a real argument with is the pre-publication restrictions that prevent me from involving the largest number of my colleagues in my work, both through international and top flight conferences and by posting things on my website. I think that we need to clarify both of those, and that it shouldn't be different if I'm publishing in a journal that a scientific society to which I belong, or don't, for that matter, publishes, or a commercial publisher, or I don't know anything about the NIH, so I won't talk about that. But if I publish in an AIP journal or an ACS journal or an Elsevier journal, I shouldn't have to decide of the journal based on whether they're going to let me go to a conference with this stuff beforehand. So, having thrown those hand grenades, I'll sit down.
Okay, so 3 very interesting presentations. We can open it up for questions.
Just a comment on a couple things Jay mentioned. Much of that language from the ES&T that you cited is aimed at protecting us from infringing on others' copyright. So the conference proceedings, as you said, the conference proceedings are copyrighted. We don't want to be in the legally difficult position of publishing some work that someone else has copyrighted. So now, to the extent that a presentation at a conference, you put up a slide in your talk, but you don't put it in the proceedings, that's fine.
But how do I get it accepted?
Well,
and of course we both do that.
Yeah, I mean, we all have to dance around that. But that, I guess my main point there is much of that language, at least for the ES&T, is to make sure that we are not, ES&T, American Chemical Society, infringing on others' copyrights.
And these copyright collisions don't stop with publication, because let's suppose I want to go to a conference a year after it's published in ES&T. They're going to copyright it, so I still can't use the figures.
Right.
We've got a systemic issue.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why you want to turn over your whole rights to them. I mean, they're doing you a service, they're distributing it for you, but yet you've thought about it, you did the work. Why sign it away in its entirety to somebody who's just going to distribute it for you?
Well, they're doing more than just distributing. If it's just distributing it, why don't we just start our own distribution network up in the library? We can just bag all the journals, make our own servers, and put it on there. That's distributing.
You want us to set up there, do you? No. Okay.
But what I mean, I recognize that however it is used in peer review, you just don't want people coming out there and just sort of saying, well, that's authoritative. But in fact, why not fight as an author to retain some of the rights to use it in other ways?
We Dave and I both have a colleague that crosses out certain things in the copyright transfer form, and it's specifically for things like this. He gets away with it, like Dave, he's a National Academy member. I'm not sure that some of my PhD students would be so bold.
Is that do you see?
We don't. I mean, I get 260 manuscripts a year. I've never gotten one of the Spark forms, and if we got it, we would send it back.
What's a Spark form?
It's the standard form for authors to retain copyright. Am I characterizing it, Erica?
Yeah. So you actually, acting as an agent of the publisher,
Correct.
choose to do them. You look at them, not some
Correct.
office at ACS. Or you are the office at ACS.
I am the office at ACS. So
Is
you
that true?
actually-
Do the ACS officials allow you to accept the Spark form?
no. No, you're refusing copyright. So
No, you're not. I mean, there are a variety of different SPARC forms in which you retain different sets of rights depending on which one that you select. So
Well-
you could select one that would simply give you the right in 12 months to put it on your own website or to put it in an institutional repository.
if we started seeing them, I guess we would take that up. But right now, as the agent of American Chemical, my instructions are, if they don't sign our form, we don't proceed with it. They could take it up with the legal department of American Chemical Society, but I have enough to do. I'm not going to sort out those issues.
I mean, from my standpoint, it would be a good thing if we could all agree that the figures, for example, were not copyrighted. I don't mind rewriting the text. And you know, I'm not going to publish in ES&T and in Science the same thing, right? What I want to do is to publish in ES&T and have it in, you know, some copyrighted proceedings.
Well, I say this, Jay. It's ACS and most other journals are very willingly give permission to use your figures in other journals.
That's right, yes.
So all you have to do if you want to publish your figure is request permission. It's email, and it comes right back, and you'll have it. I've done that many times.
But when I look at that segment that I excerpted there, if I do the reverse, if I go to a conference before I submit it to ES&T, or even after I submit it before it's published, even if I secure permission from, you know, Joe's conference committee
That's okay.
Well, but that's not what the words say.
Well, that's
The words say it's prior publication, and
If
that's
you-
unethical.
It's but if you acknowledge it's prior publication, you say, I have permission from Journal X. And I've had a couple authors do that with me. I just say, send me the permission, you know, I want to see the permission. And then the caption has to say, reproduced with permission by Journal X. That's pretty straightforward.
It struck me as odd that the wording in the ES&T said the data contained in the figure rather than the figure.
That's right.
In the U.S. copyright law, can you copyright? So if there were to be a case of a suit against the ACS, could it be based on the data in a figure, or would it have to be the figure itself?
Yeah, I mean,
It'd have to be the figure because the data themselves cannot be copyrighted. They're facts. Correct?
Correct. So I think the data itself, which is fact, cannot be copyrighted. The way you express it in a figure, presumably the expression of it in the figure, can be copyrighted.
but I mean, let's go back to. Sorry.
Sorry.
Let's go back to the way that it's actually worded.
It's still on my machine, so you shouldn't have to.
All right, fine. Okay. So it says, what this says is if the manuscript, a manuscript with essentially the same data in figures or tables or an extended abstract, it cannot be considered for publication by ES&T.
If it's copyrighted.
Well,
I read that as not applying to the protecting ACS from the law. It's hard not to read that as a policy that says we don't double publish. which is a valid policy as well. But this doesn't seem like it's protecting the journal legally. It strikes me more as in the category of we don't publish things that have already been published.
David, I'm not arguing
They won't
that
even consider it.
that the practice is there. This is chilling. I have not gone to conferences because of this sentence. It says, however, if the manuscript with essentially the same data in figures and tables or an extended abstract is published in the proceedings, it cannot be considered for publication. That's chilling to me.
Well, I say we do publish data in graphs from other publications where permission is provided.
Okay, I mean, I think that's a good policy.
One thing that you said earlier that struck me as interesting was that the AIP policy on preprints was actually coming from the culture of physics.
I think so.
This strikes me as possibly coming from the culture of chemistry, because some domains have a real tradition of publishing proceedings of conferences and them being high-profile publications. Chemistry doesn't so much have that.
Yeah.
So physical chemistry, you present at conferences, but you don't publish them in proceedings. The only one that I know of in common chemistry is in ACS proceedings, the polymer preprints.
I guess the folks at the Association of Computer Machinery, ACM, are the biggest in that. But IEEE is the same way. Physics actually isn't so much. I mean, it didn't used to be that they published anything except for a one-paragraph abstract in the bulletin. But now they've, I guess, gotten into
more conferences are going to extended abstracts that they can bind as a book and copyright it.
The issue of preprint is interesting. That ACS policy, my historical recollection is that it was published, it was released in direct response to the physics archive, that the web address that Kim put up. That at the time the archive started to become popular for high energy physics, that in fact the primary mode to publication was through the archive. If a paper was heavily read and cited in the archive, then it was invited to PhysRev. That was a very big shift in the nature of giving credentialing an article. That ACS saw that and immediately released a policy that said, we're not going to let that happen in chemistry. Anything that's put into there, we won't publish. It was, I think the timing is correct on that. So it has not, I think the archive has been around long enough that we now know that it won't bring down a publisher. Why is it that ACS retains its policy? Would you be threatened by the idea that the original manuscript could be put out in a preprint server and submitted to your journal?
Well, for NIH published work, that's now the law, right? So ACS is adopting. Look, ACS exists to serve its members. And ACS, to the extent they're concerned about protecting their publishing operation, they're concerned about protecting a service they offer their members. If ACS is working as hard as any other organization to try to figure out how to improve access, but cover its costs. If its costs aren't covered, that service goes away. That's what it comes down to. And some people say ACS is trying to make a lot of money. Well, I just haven't seen that. I go to these editorial board meetings 2 days a year, every year, and there's honest, sincere thrashing about how do we provide more access, but protect our operations so that we can still provide the service. That's what I see. I don't see any scheming to make a lot of money.
ACS has 4 employees who make more than the president of Carnegie Mellon.
Well, it's a very large organization. I'm not going to defend every aspect of ACS. I can talk about my little corner of the world as an associate editor for ES&T and what I observe. And the people that I'm engaged with the ES&T, all the associate editors are top scientists and engineers. They're attracted there because of the high quality of it. If the quality is diminished, people won't come to it. Authors won't come to it. and there are many journals like this. Okay, we're all focused on ESNT, but journals, high quality journals, have built that reputation over a long period of time through the efforts of volunteers and paid staff, and through technological innovation, attention to detail, and ethics and peer review, and that is a system worth guarding, I would say, before we turn over scientific publishing to the government, which, as I said, scares me in multiple dimensions.
And I can certainly understand why ACS would not accept papers that were posted on free, like preprint servers. If ACS charges money to people to access publications which were already available somewhere else, that would be a difficult thing. But what I do not understand is why ACS does not allow authors to post full articles on their website. And I do not understand that. And ACS only allows authors to post, as I said, abstract, title, abstract, figures, and tables.
I think after 12 months, I think you can post the full article.
No, you cannot. Still, the only way is the other people can access through the author-directed link.
It's open after 12 months.
But still, you cannot post your article on your website, while AIP allows the full posting. So I cannot understand the logic, the rationale behind that.
Well, if the AIP business model proves to be sustainable in the long run, ACS may go that way. Again, I perceive it's concern about sustainability of the business model. It's not about greedy Machiavellian scheming about how to make money.
Why did they hire the PR guy? I mean, I've been fine with ACS all my life, you know. I really thought they were fine, and they were doing exactly what you all told me they were doing. They were a society, that they cared about chemistry, they cared about knowledge. Why did they hire the pit bull?
Well, so let me just give some background on this. This is the ACS joined with other, mostly commercial publishers, I believe, in spending resources on hiring public relations people to do what they could to slow down what the NIH started with their open access policy. I guess to twist the question a little bit, who made that decision? This is a society that apparently is responding to its members. Were you asked if that was a decent way to spend the money of the organization, being on the editorial board?
No.
Were you informed of the decision?
No. I knew, although from these editorial board meetings, I knew that ACS was trying to get out its message about the value it provides in publishing. And so we hire PR people here at Carnegie Mellon. Most organizations do, to help with communicating a message. That's how I perceived it. And, you can characterize it as pit bull, and it was hiring someone to help with communications is how I viewed it, but I wasn't privy to all that planning. Or
Coming from the physics world, I do know that there were some significant cost savings going from a print distribution medium to a digital distribution medium, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30% of overall costs of publication. And I can't understand why the ACS Journal subscription fees keep going up and up if they're starting to close down their print distribution, publication, dissemination. Where's the cost savings that the people in the field of chemistry can enjoy? Why are we continuing to pay these incredible prices if the prices really should have gone down by about 30%?
But AIP and ACS, I think the institutional subscription prices are not that different. They are comparable. I thought ACS is more expensive, but I don't think that is the case. So they are comparable. It's not just ACS.
Well, it's the case where the cost savings were actually used to try to recapture some of the audience in physics, basically. If you didn't see the overall average price of the journals come down, they just use some of the money to make it easier for smaller schools to get a subscription again.
Matt, I'm no expert on this. All I can say is what I hear about at these meetings I go to. At ES&T, our print subscriptions have been dropping significantly, and the online subscriptions are going up. But there's still the infrastructure in place to produce the print product. And while you may be actually printing fewer and mailing fewer, and there are cost savings in that, to produce that print product, you have all the resources that are engaged with that. And at some point in the future, print is probably going to go away, but when that occurs is unclear. There are some corners of the world where they don't have the kind of online infrastructure we have here, and they still want print, and so that gets discussed every year. Again, I'm no expert. I don't know exactly where that's headed, but I know that maintaining the print production infrastructure there's a base cost there that until you do away with it won't vanish.
Well, your printing and your distribution costs will go down significantly.
Yes, they have gone down.
Right, whether
yes.
you're going to produce it digitally or you're going to produce a print copy. And they said now you're down to how much does it cost to whack down the trees and make the paper and slap the print on it and mail it out.
I haven't studied the balance sheets. We just rolled out American Chemical Society a new author, reviewer, editor system called Paragon Plus. And if you've submitted papers to any ACS, well, most ACS journals are on that now. That was a very significant investment over a number of years. And there was training for all involved with that. It's being modified. So there are significant costs with online as we get more sophisticated with online publication. Again, I sound like I'm just defending ACS to the hilt here. All I can say is what I observe from my little corner of the world as one associate editor with one journal.
Is it good? Is your new system good?
Yes, it's very good.
It's
very good.
Actually,
Yeah.
yes. From the author end, I think ACS is great. AIP, for example, pays paper charge. Not page charge, paper charge, the article charge. They eliminate page charge. But for ACS, we don't pay anything. And Paragon Plus system is, I think I like it. I like it very much. It's very painless.
It's a lot better than Elsevier's or Wise.
Right, that's right. But one thing I'm concerned about is the uncertain future of subscription fees, prices in general. As I said, our subscription prices have gone up by 40%, roughly speaking, over the last 5 years. And every year it's like in some years it's like 10% increase, and in some other years 3% increase, and it's I think ACS probably wants to do something. That should provide some guideline. Otherwise, in small institutions will have really.
Well, there's different pricing for different institutions. Again, I don't know all the details of that, but the library at a small country in Asia that is pretty poor will not pay what Carnegie Mellon pays. There's differential pricing, and I don't know the details of that.
But even from Carnegie Mellon perspective, I wonder whether it's
pricing. Well, you know what's really damning or very damaging to scholarship is actually when prices are too high, it inhibits the institution's capability to add in new and emerging fields.
Yeah.
And so when new articles crop up in some interdisciplinary area or otherwise, it's harder for us to say, yes, we can spend another $2,500 on this emerging area. That doesn't happen. And so it has a chilling effect, in my way of thinking, to really the way in which an institution can support the needs and the research needs of the students and faculty. And that, to me, is one of the hardest things to deal with, is prices kind of spiral around and funds available don't rise at the same rate. You
Sure.
barely can keep up with the status quo, and then is that really what serves the research needs best?
I totally understand that. And I think my perception, again, I'm not aware of all the details, but I perceive that in the engineering and science library, Lynn and Matt, Lynn Berard and Matt have done a good job. Every couple of years, a list comes around. You know, we need to lop off some journals to make room for the new kind, to either match price increases or make room for new opportunities. And I think that's a good idea. And we've made recommendations about journals to cut, some of which were, you know, sort of painful recommendations personally. But I encourage us to keep doing that.
The real dilemma, actually, sort of the unstated thing is, I see the stats, actually, for how our ACS, it's a package. So there's some things that have very, very low use, and sometimes I think somebody just got in there by mistake, or it had a key word that really fit. So we're, you know, in some ways, our subscription, what we pay is subsidizing things that are not core to our research community. So that's a different issue, and it's not an ACS journal. It's anytime you do a package.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're bringing in some chaff with the wheat, shall I say?
Yeah. Well, I know at ACS, if there's a great deal of attention to the publishing operation covering its own costs, because they don't want to subsidize it through the general membership, many of whom don't publish in or use the journals very much. So
something you said, and it goes to the whole idea of we have emerging fields. You have an acceptance rate of what, just about 35%. And is that constrained simply by the quality of the submission, or the amount of, I'll call it bandwidth, that you have with ACS? I mean, you're constrained because your journal can only be, you know, I know what journals do. They say, we're going to have 12, 24 issues a year of this size. So do those limitations constrain you?
It's a quality objective. Our article count and page count have been going up. I was going to put up the data, but I don't know that I don't know if it's semi-competent. But our total number of articles, actually that's published on our webpage. Total number of articles has been going up very significantly for years. You know, we have a quality product and it attracts authors, and so we publish more articles. And our budget has expanded. When I came on board in 2005, there were 10 associate editors. Now there are 13. We're talking about adding another one. We have an associate editor in China. We're adding another one in Asia. So our operation is growing due to demand.
This seems to, it's an issue I've been thinking about, but haven't thought through super carefully, that the growth of the research output of the world is part of the thing that's contributing to this exponential increase in journal costs. And the other issue that's coming up, I think, is the burden on the review system is also getting, I haven't seen a statistic like that before, that it takes 12 requests to get 3 reviews back. I think that'll only get worse with time. And I know the journals I review for, I'm starting to get a lot more sort of poor submissions. And so I think this style of peer review, contrasted with the style of peer review that the high energy physicists have adopted, their scales and could be more egalitarian than this style, because you might have to go with science and nature policy of triage by editors.
Well, we do that. That's painful, you know, to make a decline without review, but I do that pretty frequently.
And so does energy policy, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, even though
most journals
you've got 3 times the citation index that they do, but even there.
And is that putting too much power in the hands of the few compared to what high energy physicists have decided to do?
Right. I try not to, you try to not abuse that, but you have to. You don't want to waste reviewer time.
No. And to keep costs down, if you send out for review, then you're spending the cost of publishing almost. It sounds like it's almost as expensive.
Right. You're using personnel time to deal with that. Maybe Glorianne or Erica could comment on. There is increasing volume of research being produced across and that the globe, and that's responsible for proliferation of journals, right? And
Oh, I agree. I mean, that, you know, to think everything's all wrapped up. I mean, every time you turn around, there's a new journal, and you pick it up, and you look and say, gee, there's something of interest and value here. And, you know, I know the game with all the editorial boards, you get the best you can to kind of, you know, have an impact. Because when you're new, you need to find ways to attract people. I think starting a new journal today can be very difficult if it's not tied to some of the, you know, the big publishers, or whether it's society publishing or commercial.
And you look at what Nature did in splitting into subcategories. It's been very successful for them.
Well, but not for us.
Not for, well, in terms of,
It's a successful formula that's been used in the fields of biology, chemistry, and physics, and math.
Yeah.
That is, conquer and divides, you know.
I guess my question for you, and I know several of the four of you have your feet in more than one discipline or more than one area. So if we look at physics and we have archive and the information is being shared broadly with everybody in the world who wants to look at it, and then we have ACS, which is pretty locked down. You can't even put up your own work on your own web page. Or maybe you can after 12 months if David's right. David?
I don't think you can. I think you can just post the link to the ACS.
to the direct link.
Right.
Yeah, how does that compete for the hearts and minds of young people who are coming into science and deciding where they want to make their career? Which is more attractive?
well, if it's a quality journal, people will want to publish there, whatever it takes. I mean, as much as Jay has complaints about ES&T, he likes to publish his work there because the policy work Jay's publishing gets a lot of visibility, and
I think
we're not trying to gouge Jay, we're trying to protect Jay.
I think the answer to the young people question is an interesting one. People get exposed to top quality research usually in journal clubs. And there, if you're at an institution, it's going to be running a journal club, what you do is you grab the copy, whoever's running the journal club, and distributes a copy to the 20 or so students that are in there. And I don't think people are getting the cutting-edge research in the ways that they get many other information sources. However, what they are seeing, and I see this in my students, is they'll be looking at the reports about those papers. And, you know, ACS, for example, has hired a bunch of people to write, you know, kind of the best of the various journals. And, you know, you get contacted. I just got off the phone Friday with one of your folks about a paper that's coming out. And, you know, that turns out to be where a lot of folks get their data. It gets picked up on PR Newswire or in ViralWire or something like that. My students hear about it. And so I think I'd rephrase your question a little bit, which would be, what is the policy that gets those things done the most? And I would say that those folks who write in the, you know, kind of science news flavor do it in two ways. One is from the releases from the journals, and that's about a third of it, and about two-thirds of it is from meetings. You know, the more I think about this, Dave, the less I think that this is protecting ACS in any way. I think this is a cultural issue, what's still up there on the board. Because, I mean, I don't see it in AIP, and I don't see it in a couple of other areas.
Well, I can say, from participating in these meetings, there's a lot of discussion about being careful not to infringe on others' copyright. And I think we would all admit that attention to copyright by academics over the years has been pretty darn loose.
Yeah.
Pretty darn loose.
Concur.
And to the extent that there's more awareness of it, And this kind of debate maybe will change the way copyright laws are written. But academics have historically kind of ignored copyright, not even thought about it.
I agree with that. But I mean, reading this carefully, I don't think actually that except for the first sentence where I can understand that that's a reaction to it, where that's coming from. If I don't have, let's look at the second piece. The proceedings are not copyrighted. All I'm allowed to do there is a short abstract, no figures, no tables. Okay? If the manuscript is published in the proceedings, or the same, a manuscript, doesn't have to be the same words, a manuscript with the same data as in the figures or tables is published in the proceedings, doesn't say whether that's copyrighted or not. It can't be considered for publication. I think there's some latitude there to still protect the copyright collision that I think you and I are both sensitive to. We don't want a copyright collision. And yet allow the presentations and meetings that I think is really quite critical to getting a fire lit under a new paper.
Well, yeah, I will commit to taking those specific words to the editors' meeting next year, and we'll see if we can tweak them a little bit.
Thank you.
I would bring up,
But I think your copyright words are very well taken.
It is copyright infringement that's the main driver, and maybe the words aren't the best there, but...
And that's fair. I think copyright infringement is a serious issue, and we get copyright collisions all the time.
I would include the issue of letter journals, because this is somewhat,
sorry.
that there's a tradition in many fields about letter journals where you're allowed to publish a letter that's here's an exciting finding and follow it up with a full paper.
Right.
And this is also against the spirit of that.
You bet.
Share some thoughts here. I agree that academics have traditionally sort of been laissez-faire or whatever about copyright. But it's an interesting tension to me that now that authors are attending more to copyright, and they are the original copyright owners, and you publishers only have the rights that they give you. So on the one hand, you want them to be aware. On the other hand, you'd rather they not, and they continue to just give you everything without thinking about it. Okay, that serves your interest better if they aren't really aware, and they aren't really savvy, and they don't really try to keep any of their rights. Because once they do, we have comments like you had in the title of one of your slides up there. Ignoring copyright endangers independent publication. Well, authors aren't ignoring copyright. They're asserting their rights to keep their own rights so that they don't have to spend their valuable time asking for permission to reuse something that was theirs in the first place, but you force them to give them away. So now, even though you say we will give them permission to reuse their work, why should they have to ask for it? Why should they have to give it away?
They don't have to publish in a journal. They can put it up on their own website or on the institutional archive here and advertise it.
Publisher,
and I think we will see more of that. We are seeing more of it, and it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out. But there's no obligation to send their paper to EST.
I agree, and the same thing holds with NIH, because ACS has been one of the big pushing back, along with Wiley. There are others really aggressively trying to hammer and stop that NIH policy going through. And they're doing the cart before the horse thing even now, trying to stop it from going into effect on April 7th and this and that, saying you're appropriating our copyrights. Well, no, they're not appropriating the copyrights. This is all going forward. Authors have to retain those rights, or they can't take NIH funding. So we're not appropriating the publisher's copyrights. You're not going to get those rights anymore if those folks want to comply with the NIH policy. So what you said there, they can refuse to publish with ACS. They can refuse funding from the NIH. It's all the author's choice. But this pushback that we're getting about you're appropriating our rights or this and that, no. The rights are the author's until or unless they give them away. And they have a right to do that. And masking it with all of this other song and dance just is really irritating.
Well, if you can just choose, take the NIH funding and publish on PubMed. That could be your sole publication.
No, it's got to be a peer-reviewed. No, it cannot.
But I don't think that serves the purposes of...
Who pays for the peer review?
That won't comply with
research.
NIH.
Just put it up.
Well, okay, I
That
mean,
too needs,
So somebody has to pay for the peer review.
but
Carnegie Mellon could pay for the peer
But
review.
Dave, the 12-month principle's already been accepted, right? I mean, the idea is that the balance is probably okay if the journal has exclusivity for a year, and then it goes into the public domain. That probably is all right as far as covering the costs, the legitimate costs, right? And so the question is, if the 1 year, and you know, this 1 year stuff has been accepted for many years for large group publications that have been funded by the government and so forth. You have to put spacecraft data on a public archive a year after you publish the paper. I mean, the actual raw data.
Mhm.
We're not even seeing that kind of stuff. But for any NASA-funded stuff, that's been the rule since the mid-'70s. And that works out okay. And the year principle is probably not perfect, but it isn't bad either.
That's kind of where we are now.
well, I just,
In some ways.
follow it, which you brought up, I think, in one of your earlier slides, which goes to part of, I think, a publisher's well-being, is what's the business model. And so, you know, the one thing about NIH, what's the impact of all the primary sales come from the first year subscriptions? Right? Is that the business model, or are there other sources of revenue from publication that are outside of the initial subscription model? Because if that's where the bulk of the money comes from, what then is the financial impact of putting things up freely available a year after publication?
Well, I think there's some concern about it. It's not clear. I should have brought the notes with me. ACS is participating. They're doing some pilot studies with earlier access just to see how subscription rates play out. There are a couple test journals. Maybe you know what they are. I think there are 3 journals. ACS isn't trying to. It's trying to serve its members. It's concerned about covering its costs. And if all the subscribers vanish, the costs aren't covered and the thing implodes.
But the idea of putting it up after a year, does that really affect the business model, the financial model that ACS uses to provide the peer review and distribution?
Yeah, Erica, I don't know the answer to that, except I think that it's an ongoing experiment because this has only been going a couple of years and data are being collected.
What are the journals? Well, I'd be interested to know what the journals are, out of curiosity.
The ones with the pilots?
Yeah.
I have that. I can dig it out of my notes, give it to you.
Did you say that you believe that now that going forward, authors are going to be allowed to put their work into PubMed Central?
Into?
PubMed Central. So if you got a submission from somebody who was funded by NIH, and they wrote to you a letter up in advance and said,
Yeah, that's NIH mandate. So
NIH mandate.
Right, so ACS.
I believe, yeah, so ACS is going to comply. I believe that the raw manuscript, unformatted, that will be, the author would submit that to PubMed. If the author wants the formatted version to go there, they do the author's choice that Jung mentioned, pay $1,000 or $1,500, and ACS will format it and send it for you to PubMed. I suspect many authors will do that.
Yeah.
There have been page charges on some journals for years, and that's to try to cover the cost.
Another thing we should not forget is this is the culture. So as David mentioned, these publishers add values to the papers. So when in academia, when we do promotion, reappointment, things like that, we oftentimes the paper is published in very prestigious journals carrying more weight. So this is just our culture, the culture of
Librarians are no different. There are journals we know that are like the top 3, and that's where we'd like to see articles published. We're no different than anyone else in that regard.
It strikes me that the ACS and AIP and Science and Nature are in a special position that they're less likely to lose subscriptions if they change their policies in some way. Whereas this, like many Elsevier journals, if the library were to come and say, well, you know, you can get the preprint for the first year, and you can get the real thing a year later. Do you really want us to pay $5,000 for this? I'd probably say, no, don't pay $5,000. If you're saying about Jack's, the Journal of American Chemical Society, I'd say, no, we need the copyright. So it does surprise me that ACS has teamed up with Elsevier rather than, or views themselves in the same fear as Elsevier is.
I think you're very right about that perception about, you know, what's core and what's not. And I've had Elsevier ask me, well, why don't you get, I don't know, 500 more journals for us? And so I say, but, you know, you're not core the way ACS journals are core, IP journals are core, because they have this, that's the space they really like to be in, but they're not.
So I suspect ACS's fears are unfounded and Elsevier's might be founded.
Yeah, people about that, right. So in terms of institutional subscription pricing is concerned, ACS is very close to AIP, or even doing a little better, because ACS has huge industry, customers, so they are financially more flexible than AIP. When it comes to open access, my major complaint about ACS is the authors are not allowed to post their articles, even their own, articles, not the ACS formatted, but their own formatted articles on the web. I think that's my.
Well, you would probably admit, many of our colleagues pay no attention to any rule, and they're posting articles all over the place.
Right, exactly. So, off the record, yes, right. But, still, the policy-wise, copyright-wise, I think ACS having that kind of a very explicit copyright restriction is, mind-boggling. Since it's a non-profit organization chartered by Congress.
Well, the interesting thing is we live in an era of change. Things are changing. So whatever is today, and next year might be something different, or just change a little bit different. Move a little differently to open access or not.
Right, but I think this is moving in the right direction.
I was actually kind of surprised at the statistics for SciFinder Scholar being so widely available, knowing how hard it was for us to get enough seats just for our people not to get turned away all the time. How widespread are subscriptions to the entire suite of ACS journals, or like the smaller colleges around us?
I don't have stats.
I don't know. I don't know, Matt.
And the reason I'm asking is I teach coursework for another university nearby that not very big. Oftentimes I'm finding myself, if I want something that's a late-breaking new area of research, usually my only choice is to hope that an author was kind enough, when they were allowed to by copyright law or the agreement they signed, to go after that individual author's work that they put on their website. And at least for this poor school with a small group of students just trying to learn their field,